introduce our first speakers. They're going to give a talk, Building an Analytics Operation, Lessons Learned Through the Oral History of American Soccer Analysts. It'll be Brian Greenwood and Tyler Richardett. Brian has been a contributor to American Soccer Analysis since 2024. By day, he's a software engineer for Vanguard, a financial services firm. Tyler has been a contributor for American Soccer Analysis since 2019. Professionally, he serves as the Chief Technology Officer for Rate Our Vote, a tech nonprofit dedicated to restoring voting rights for people with past convictions. Both of them help maintain and scale American Soccer Analysis' web applications, infrastructure, and data and machine learning pipelines. So with that, I turn it over to Brian.
First, I just want to do a quick thanks to Scott Powers for the this well this afternoon. And second, thanks to all of the call. So, gentlemen, we are both introduced a group called American Soccer Analysis. We've originally been asked to come down and speak about some of the contributions we made there over the years, and a little bit about the open source landscape. We'll still do much of that, but we decided to draw this up a little bit. So what it's evolved into is, as the slide says, an oral history of and world of letter 2 American Soccer Analysis. So we had a few good reasons for doing that. One was to celebrate an institution. This is in our effort of years. We've been lucky enough to hold a unique place within its it is lucky enough to hold a unique place within our industry. Brian and I have spent a combined 10 years contributing, and it's a group obviously that we have a lot of love and a lot of reverence for, enough to work very good as an institution. On the reverse side of that coin, frankly, we've both been on the outside before, and at times it can feel a little bit opaque, a little bit hard to define. That's by no means intentional, so for the next 20 minutes, we're going to bring that a little bit more to focus. Second, we suspect that a lot of the work that Brian and I have done behind the scenes parallels a lot of the work ongoing within clubs. So especially for those seeking to work in a club, or for those who are early in their tenure at a club, we thought it would be helpful for us to share some of the lessons we've learned along the way, or in other words, what we've broken and how we aim to fix it. And third, if you're fortunate enough to speak at gatherings such as this, some of the best advice you get from others is one, to speak about what you know best, and two, to speak about what you like best, and for us, not us. So on that note, I'm Tyler, representative out of Chicago, but I've contributed to ASI since 2019. I've been a long-suffering New York Rebels fan domestically, and a long-suffering Portsmouth fan internationally. Coincidentally, these other years are good years are few and far between. They seem to line up. 2024 was great. 2008, high watermark. Everything in between, more or less so. As Jim mentioned, soccer analytics is just a hobby for me. It's not pays the bills. Starting Monday, I'll be the CTO of a small tech nonprofit.
And I'm Brian Greenwood. I'm based out of Philadelphia. Been an ASI contributor since 2021. I'm a Philadelphia Union fan domestically, and I've been a non-league club in England internationally. As soon as Philadelphia has an NWSL team, I'll be a fan of that team as well. And by day, I'm a software engineer with a large financial company.
All right, so for those uninitiated, a brief introduction to ASA. As I said, it's been around for 12 years, since 2013. Over that time, we've had more than 100 contributors come and go. Day-to-day, contributors maintain a connection in 2 ways. One of those is via Slack streaks here. Second is an innate awareness of matter shot-stopping abilities. Functionally, it's a very decentralized operation. Our contributors execute independently, also obviously receiving a ton of feedback, a ton of support from the rest of the group. We have folks who come to us from all kinds of different backgrounds, with all kinds of different skills, plenty of different goals or aspirations, some who are hyper-focused on getting a career in the industry, some who are more interested in the ring, and some who are frankly register, ship post, and Slack. But all of that is welcome and all that is celebrated, and I think that's one thing that's been largely enriching for all of us in the environment over the last decade plus. The last thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we start down memory lane is something we're all really proud of at ASI, and that's the number of contributors who have gone on to have established careers within the industry, across some of the clubs you see here, federations, media organizations, and so on. Hopefully all of those are depicted here. So for the remainder of the talk, we've taken ASI's history and split it up across 4 sections. For those who may be familiar with our ASI and Berwick, our MLS coverage, these titles may look a little bit familiar, but regardless, I'm going to explain. So for each of the 3 and soon to be 4 most recent MLS seasons, one of our contributors, Elliot, who was unavailable to make it down this weekend, unfortunately, goes out and does a survey of each of the analytics departments at each MLS club. Headcount at the end of the day is largely what dictates the tiers themselves, but we have a lot of fun naming those tiers at the outset. And so we publish a little mirror up that evaluate our own technical and analytical maturity against that same language. So starting at tier 3 in this case, so back in 2015, Drew, Maddie, and Harrison, see here on the screen, each with a little bit of background in baseball and analytics, established ASA, the hypothesis, what if Fangraphs, but for American soccer. And if you benefited from ASA in any small way, I just wanted to emphasize that if you've ever felt any inclination to write a thank you note or send a case of beer, please start with these 3 individuals up here on the screen. Drew in particular, he works in electoral politics. He just welcomed his first child in the world back in October, and he could probably use the video. So this was really an exercise for us to go back through some of the artifacts from early days. This is the first post that put up on WordPress back in April of 2013. And I want to pull out one part, roughly in the middle of this post. Quote, none of us here have the answers, nor do any of us think we're going to come up with them. But there are a lot of smart people out there that sometimes go without being heard, and our self-proclaimed job is to find those people, give them a voice, and have a little bit of fun doing it. And I feel like ASA is largely stuck to the theme. That's 2 of those themes of humility and community in the decade plus. Hopefully we see some of that. So we also pulled out an old email chain that came a month later when 3 of them started to interrogate the analytics piece in particular. How would they go about collecting data, what data would they analyze? And they simply pulled up shot maps on the MLS website and started hand coding those. Also wanted to come up with XY coordinates for each, so they split the field into 6 sections, as you can see down there on the bottom right. Assigned one of those 6 zones and distributed that information. First, just the Excel files, really messy, or something like that. And then later, as they began sourcing a little bit more team and player level counting data, they would also go on to publish these figures via hard-coded static HTML tables that would get refreshed once a week. I show all this, obviously, because it's part of our history, we're proud of it, but also for the early bird folks in the room. I imagine you'll probably hear this a lot over the next 2 days. My hope is that this serves as tangible evidence to back some of that up. Everyone starts somewhere, start small, put these things out in the world, and you'll learn less by doing it. Going on to the next section. There are 2 themes that we think underpin this next year, these next 3 years. And the first of those is that we start to see ASA's work and largely public analytics more broadly piercing into the mainstream today. That begins for us with the first release of an interactive web application, which now gives users more agency to come in, filter, and aggregate on their own volition. This was still rudimentary from a technical perspective. We'll talk about it a little bit. Raw data was being stored in flat files, CSVs, things like that, on a free Dropbox instance, and got deployed sitting alongside to a free training server instance, 2 services which we quickly come down grow. And as one quick brief aside, these slides, this next run of slides is going to be really good fodder for some of the members of the MLS guys conversations I mentioned. We'll be all having at the bar later, so take note of names like Zedek and Charleston, for example. Further, there was also a concerted effort from some of our contributors to start deconstructing some of these core concepts for the analytically curious. The figure on the right here will look familiar to a lot of in the room today. This stuff has been around for a while. But as one example, here's Elliott again in 2018 with illustrating quickly the relationship between individual expected goal values and match outcomes. So looking back, we believe some of this stuff had a snowball effect. We started to observe data being referenced and attributed in live broadcasts, which for us was really, really cool, really gratifying. The earliest example we were able to pull out was a 2017 MLS Cup playoff conference game, actually here in Houston. Commentator used in this case post-shot expected goal values to emphasize the impact that Amelia, who had been out injured for the playoffs, had over the course of Kansas City's regular season. We also started to see some of the written analysis that we put together enter coaching circles. Sean Davis of the New York Red Bulls shared a story with us about an article that had been printed out and distributed at the Red Bulls training facility. He obviously didn't disclose the placement of the article or the stock of the paper that it was printed on, so we have to imagine that it looks something like that. And as we briefly covered already, this began culminating in contributors accepting full-time positions in clubs with data providers, media partners, and so on. So one big lesson we learned through that theme, and has been reinforced in Brian and I in our own careers, is the importance of prototyping, getting things out there. It's one thing to publish a piece of analysis that remains static, but it's another thing, it can be a lot more impactful. To put something interactive in the hands of the consumer and allow them to play around, allow them to lead their own discovery and their own education. In doing so, one thing we'll emphasize here is to favor existing higher-level frameworks where you can, things like Shine, things like Streamlit, even Tableau, that'll help quickly stand things up and put them in the hands of others. To be responsive to users, favor regular incremental feedback, or regular incremental improvements that is responsive to their feedback. Real quick before I pass it to Brian, the second theme during this time is more of a reflection, I think, of the wider public analytics space, and that is this transition from discrete events to risk management. And soccer is a continuous game with possession sequences. So under the hood, for us, this resulted in more contextual information making its way into our underlying models, which was helpful for predictive performance. And the introduction of game flows, some of which you may be familiar with. The quick introduction, I know we're not supposed to say the M word in these circles, but it is a quick illustration of momentum swings over the course of the games.
I'm going to talk a little bit about ASI's history from 2020 to present. We can all take some of those reasons expected goal. So the theme basically out of this time period is scaling up, becoming more mature data, particularly a software engineering perspective. So we introduced a single database, CICD, continuous delivery, configuration as code, infrastructure as code, and all this kind of enabled us to quickly iterate on the web app features, different measures we were trying to come up with. And it also allowed us to really expand our coverage into the reach, the size of OS, specifically in the big cell and game cell. And because we were able to generate these advanced metrics for those leads, I think it also led to increased coverage for those leads from an analytical perspective. In addition to that, we really focused on our data pipelines. You can see on the right here is it's actually a feature state diagram, but it's not too different from what we have currently. So if you're familiar with the web app or API, that's what's on the left-hand side over here, which is the Postgres database. And in the middle there is kind of what our data pipeline looks like. The bottom part of that is actually something we don't have implemented yet, but it's basically just an easier way for ASI users to be able to investigate some of the underlying raw data. So a couple lessons learned from this era is baking resiliency. Use configuration files where you can, whether it's for infrastructure, whether it's for data. Really makes your lives easier. All you have to do to add an ID is just update a text file and a couple lines. Like I mentioned, really use this for competitions over time. Another thing was doing this industry that did flawless, added quality checks and all that issues. One issue we actually run into quite frequently still is playing games updating or changing. Right now, it's still a manual fix for us, but something we try to handle automatically in the future. And if you do get an error, I'll try to isolate and mark in it, so let's say, one error in the event doesn't throw off the whole pipeline. And then in the previous role, I did a lot of teaching version control to data scientists and data analysts. And version control is your best friend here. Allows you to use its back. Kind of on that same thing, use the right tools. Not all of your data needs to get access to the lowest latency levels. There's a difference between what we consider transactional data versus analytical data. Really, it's the analytical data that we want to service to users that have higher latency. We basically deliver this lesson the hard way because we put everything into a giant Postgres database that really put a lot of constraints on how quickly it can scale up and how much data we can store there as well. And thirdly, it's very expensive. It's probably the biggest line item when I spend every month. Kind of what I mentioned is that observe your high cost abilities for production globally, and your low cost one use a lot of storage. And then design for all users. Consider the needs and abilities of all consumers. Like Tyler mentioned, we're using CSVs and Dropboxes for a while, and it was necessary to transition away from that to scale up, but it kind of alienated some of our Excel users. But on the flip side too, it kind of forced them to get upskill in programming language or individual and help advance their career further along. And we did mention goals added, which is kind of our own perspective overall. The diagram probably says a better job than I will explain it, but essentially the measure of players go all contribution, and probably is how much each touch affects the team's chances of scoring seasons. And really just want to highlight this was remember, depending on whether there was a lot of discussions in our Slack about what features to put in the model, what what the metric output was, and it was really better across a number of people. So kind of the lesson learned here is start with your success criteria, define your evaluation methods and criteria early on, especially valuable for targets and ambiguous and tangible like expected goals, goals that are, especially because goals that survive from expected goals. There's a lot of layers in there that aren't necessarily easy to understand. So we have actually had some analysts on our Slack watch plays and compare goals that what they're in those ways and the success. And so the last year, nerd boss, but it's essentially for sure if you like to do it ASI, you have a long backlog and some whole items on there. But one of the things we like to do is open source tools. We have some screenshots here for roster builder and trade builder we've been working on. A research library is also something we like to get out there. We have a bunch of long with your app enhancements and a whole items in there, like profiles, performance improvements, and more data sources. We also have an announcement for them as well coming out fairly soon. So there's a couple of resources out there to get started. If you're on a lot-time team looking to do more with less, benefit of being able to take our role for your multiple teams. It's basically what you're technically like, use more technology, so it's been improving and focus on what really differentiates you, which is your insights and axes. Devin Cooler also has a couple of tools out there. The soccer analytics handbook is a great one. If you're going to go to on that one. He also just released a component for Greenwood, specifically taking soccer back to the this called soccer. It's our API plan, so that gives you access to all our data. And then in the hockey analytics space, it's still relevant. So you're a good article on how to create your own sports analytics website. And then we'll leave you with a call to action. You work for a cloud, or even if you're just heavy user of basic stuff, it's also just for your day-to-day. We've got a semi-public backlog on GitHub. We want feedback on what you find useful. And then if you're interested in contributing to ASI, reach out. Fancy emails, all of the analysis, and then our DMs are always open.
questions? Anyone? Bueller? All right, thank you guys.